2:37 UTC. November 12, 2043, Major Asha Delgado was finishing her pre-dawn coffee when the first flash scoured the horizon. From her vantage high above Earth's atmosphere, the endless black of space should have been calm, only the faint pinpricks of distant stars and the slow drift of continental light across the curve of the planet. Station Helios, the civilian-run orbital relay, was a hub for communications, weather observation, and deep space telescopy. Tonight, even the auroras danced in muted greens. Unaware of the storm about to break, Asha tapped the viewport's control to shift the angle of fraction. She was trained to notice the slightest anomaly, a meteor fragment, a rogue satellite, a solar flare far brighter than forecast. But what streaked across the screen defied every protocol. At first, she thought it was an instrumentation glitch, a line of electric blue tracing from zenith to horizon, too straight, too uniform to be natural dot. Then came the shudder. Alarms torn. Across Helios decks, like the shriek of metal under tearing force. Light panels strobing red, indicating an external overpressure event. Bulkheads rattled as the station rocked an impact so precise, so powerful, it felt like a freight train, striking at 400 kilometers altitude. Asha's breath caught in her throat. She tapped the comlink. "Control, this is Delgado," she called, voice steady despite her pulse. "What the hell just hit us?" Static, then a frantic voice. "Major, readings are off the charts. We're scrambling sensors. Multiple impacts detected. All simultaneous." Her eyes darted to the tactical overlay in the central console. 77 geolocated signatures, each registering as an instantaneous displacement of energy far, exceeding any known ballistic or explosive event. And then the feed from the ground-based observatories lit up like fireworks, megacities across every time zone engulfed in that same cobalt flare. She spoke again, voice barely a whisper. 77? Every continent? A deep voice crackled back. Affirmative. All hits within 15 seconds. No missile signatures. No trajectory. Just beam. Below, the Earth's night ignited in a cascade of destruction. From the frozen wastes of Siberia to the humid bayous of Louisiana, urban centers collapsed in crystalline eruptions, glass and concrete liquefying into glowing rivers of blue-white light. In Buenos Aires, crowds watching a World Cup qualifying match cheered a goal one moment and vanished the next. In Lagos, a 1,000-year-old mosque was reduced to ashless dust in an instant. From her station, Asha watched the planets. Heart break. She fought the urge to press her hand against the thick glass, to will herself closer to the world she had sworn to observe and protect. Instead, she keyed the intercom. All hands. Emergency Protocol Gamma-3. Initiate shield reinforcement matrices. Divert power to structural dampers. Her order was met with a chorus of confirmations as technicians snapped to crisis response. Helios was built to ride out micrometeoroid showers and dodge space debris. It was not designed to withstand planetary shockwaves. Panels warped and buckled. Power flickered as the station fought to stabilize. 2:42 UTC. Back on Earth, the response was immediate and futile. NORAD's missile silos launched volleys of hypersonic interceptors toward the origins of the beams, calculated from the seismic shockwaves they generated. Railgun batteries on U-destroyers unleashed tungsten slugs skyward. Russia's S-72 railguns in the Urals fired plasma-charged projectiles. China's new orbital laser array, still in testing, targeted each beam's point of impact. With pinpoint precision, none made contact. Each defensive volley shifted the beam's shape or refracted its wavelength ever so slightly, rendering radar and laser guidance blind. Missiles dissolved in mid-air, relays detecting only blips of electromagnetic residue before the warheads harmlessly plunged back to Earth, The planet's greatest arsenals were reduced to starless dots of failure. 3:15 UTC in London. The Prime Minister's emergency session convened amid flickering lights and the distant roar of the Thames. World leaders joined virtually by clandestine. Delegations from every surviving nation stared at the same feeds. A grid of blinking red squares, denoting zones of annihilation. The President of the United States confessed over the secure line that the enemy had no identifiable mass, no detectable origin. Just energy. Meanwhile, in the desert wastes of northern Mali, Colonel Idris Adzara led a ragged brigade of the UN peacekeepers turned frontline defenders. His radio crackled with orders to fall back, to conserve what firepower remained. But when the next shaft of cobalt light struck, even his armory stocked with heavy artillery and cluster munitions was rendered impotent. Sand turned glass. Vehicles melted, and soldiers whispered prayers into their helmets. 4:02 UTC, on the shores of Nauru, a tiny coral island thousands of miles from any major power. The local weather buoy detected an eerie rise in ambient temperature and radiation levels. A shuttleboat operator, Maria Takai, saw the glow on the horizon and thought it was a distant storm. When she realized it was daylight at night and the sea itself seemed to boil, she cut engines and watched in horror as the island's huts disintegrated in a silent wave. Back on Helios, Asha Delgado's station had stabilized enough to run. Diagnostic sweeps. She worked alongside Lieutenant Marcus Chun, a quantum communication specialist. Together, they isolated the beam's wave patterns. Each impact left behind a lattice of entangled particles resonating at a frequency impossible to replicate on Earth. Chun's voice shook as he spoke. "Major, these pulses? They're not weapons. They're restructuring the planet." "Terraforming?" Delgado whispered, dread tightening her chest. Chun nodded, eyes wide with disbelief. "The beams alter mineral bonds. They're weaving the crust into something else." Delgado punched the intercom again. "All units, cease missile launch protocols. Shift to observational mode. We need data, not wasted fire. And send everything to Earth Command." Her orders met a chorus of dissent. Weapons crews furious at being told to stand down. But Asha held firm. Every interceptor launched meant another. Data point lost, another chance to understand what it wanted. If humanity was to survive, at least comprehend, she would not let fear blind them. 4:30 UTC below, the planet convulsed. Great cities lay in ruin, and those that remained flickered like dying embers. Human voices, once triumphant and loud, were muted to whispers of prayer and despair. Above, Station Helios floated in silent vigil. Its solar panels warped and cracked by the shock waves, but still clinging to orbit. Major Delgado gazed through the viewport at the unfolding apocalypse, heart heavy but mind alight with purpose. She whispered to the empty station, "We will learn, we will adapt, and we will live." Far below, humanity's darkest hour had only just begun. But for the first time since the shafts fell, there was a spark of defiance, the promise that understanding, not retaliation, might yet be the key to surviving the storm. The world's remaining leaders huddled beneath Geneva's fortified bunker, their voices echoing through concrete corridors lit by emergency strips. President Lena Morozov gazed at the holomap suspended above the command table. Continents carved into a web of glowing red impact zones. Every major city, every strategic stronghold, bore the signature of the cobalt shafts. General Eduardo Salinas, head of the newly formed United Earth Defense Force, tapped a sequence on the holomap. "We've rerouted all remaining anti-orbital assets to Sector 7, he announced, referring to the orbital perimeter directly above Antarctica. "If we can't stop the beams, Maybe we can at least learn their pattern. Morozov's jaw set. And if we fail? She asked quietly. Salinas met her gaze. Then we buy time. Across the table, Ambassador Jagjit Singh, former Indian foreign minister, pressed his fingers together. Time we do not have. Our global food stocks will run out by July. Hydroponic parks are failing without surface water. If we don't adapt, we perish just as surely as if those beams struck us again. A hush fell over the room. Outside, tectonic. Tremors rippled through the Alps as the terraforming pulses altered subterranean pressures. Drills bounced in distant laboratories. The bunker ceiling groaned in protest. Each day, humanity's grip on the surface loosened. 2. The iridescent seas of New Shanghai, thousands of kilometers away. In what had been New Shanghai once, a glittering megalopolis of glass towers and sky, Bridges' Dr. Emil Park crouched beside a collapsed metro car. His LED headlamp sliced through the acrid dust, illuminating shards of blue-white glass where train seats once stood. He scooped a handful of the crystalline residue and examined it through a portable spectrometer. Lieutenant Yun Zhao, his salvage team commander, watched warily. Doctor, we have 2 minutes before the next pulse. The last one dropped the temperature by 15 degrees in under 30 seconds. Park's eyes never left the spectrometer. The readout bounced between normal silicon signatures and anomalous quantum fluctuations. These beams, they break down molecular bonds and reassemble them, he murmured. Look, carbon atoms realign into graphene-like lattice. Wow. Silicates fuse into transparent ceramics. Zhao shook her head. That may explain the destruction, but not how to stop it. Park sealed the sample in a lead-lined vial. We need to amplify the beam's signature. If we can create a feedback loop, force the pulse to collapse upon itself, it might neutralize its restructuring effect. Zhao's radio crackled. Dr. Park, roof collapse imminent. We must move. As the bunker turned station shuddered, Park rose, clutching his sample. Gather all the fragments you can, he ordered, and get me the AI-enhanced fusion reactor cores we salvaged last week. We'll build a feedback emitter. Behind him, the city groaned as the next alien wave altered the soil's crystalline matrix. Skyscrapers shifted on liquefied foundations. Streets buckled into chasms that gleamed like veins of silver. Humanity's ingenuity drove them forward, even as every pulse urged them back. 3. Colonial monoliths and subterranean havens on the frost-scarred plains of eastern Siberia. The Église Militaire Francaise maintained its last terrestrial cathedral, a massive subterranean complex carved deep into the permafrost. Father Anselme Marceau, its spiritual leader, delivered rations to starving refugees, his cassock blackened by geothermal smoke. A group of children clustered around him, their faces smeared with soot. Father, one whispered, will God protect? Use from the sky? Marceau knelt, offering what comfort he could. Perhaps, he said, voice hushed, but he has given us minds to fight. Our prayers may guide us, but our hands must build the path. That very night, engineers repurposed church bells into resonant chambers designed to amplify low-frequency oscillations, hoping to destabilize the terraforming waves. Conglomerations of twisted metal and old steel girders formed oscillators across the ice. They were crude, but born of desperation. As the cobalt dawn fractured the horizon, Marceau readied his makeshift transmitter. For hope, he intoned. And then, through the rift of wind and alien pulse, the bells rang, a knell of defiance echoing across the void. IV. Oceans forged anew deep beneath the waves. Admiral Ren Nakamura's fleet of geodetic submarines patrolled the Pacific. Each sub carried a prototype railgun turret, its massive barrel encased in pressurized hull plating. Their mission, intercept beams at the ocean's surface. Using water-cooled plasma rounds in the command module of the JS Akusa, Nakamura stared at sonar screens flickering with seismic tremors. Target bearing 045 degrees, he ordered. A drill team of weapons officers loaded the first round, a tungsten, ceramic composite designed to fracture the beam's coherence. The turret thundered. The projectile sliced through boiling water, tracing a bright arc. Even as it approached the surface, the sub's sensors detected the beam modulating, shifting its phase angle to evade. The shell vaporized 3 meters from the impact, leaving. The beam undisturbed, Nakamura slammed a fist on the console. Damn it! Every countermeasure delays the pulse by milliseconds, but never stops it. His XO, Lieutenant Commander Ilya Petrov, narrowed his eyes. Admiral, we've isolated a fluctuation pattern. The beam's refraction rate spikes when struck at a 22-degree angle. If we adjust our trajectory, Nakamura paused, then nodded. On my mark, now. The subs turned in unison, firing in concert. Their combined volley intersected the beam at the precise angle, grooves of plasma flaring outward. For an instant, the screens registered a blip. The beam's projection dimmed by 12%. A cheer erupted. Nakamura allowed himself a grim smile. 12%. We've bought ourselves seconds. The Council's resolve back in Geneva's. Underground, President Morozov listened to the Admiral's report via secure link. On the holo map, a sector above the Pacific flickered from red back toward gray. 12%. A whisper of hope. She turned to Dr. Miriam Al-Ramzi, head of the Council's Science Division. Prepare a full mission dossier, Morozov ordered. Deploy whatever resources we have to replicate Admiral Nakamura's angle across every theater. And increase funding for Park's feedback emitter project. Humanity needs every edge. Al-Ramzi bowed. At once, Madam President. A silence fell as Morozov addressed the assembled leaders. We have no illusions. This war is against principles we barely comprehend. But today, her voice strengthened, we showed we can adapt. We will take those seconds, multiply them, and turn them into minutes, minutes into hours, hours into days. We fight not for retaliation, but for survival and for hope. The bunker's artificial lights hummed in approval. Somewhere above, the terraforming pulses awaited their next move. And below, on a fractured world, humanity did what it had always done best, refused to die quietly. At the subterranean command citadel beneath Delhi, the cavernous war room pulsed with the glow of holopanels and the hum of supercomputers. Commander Raj Patel stood before the central display, a mosaic of Earth's battered surface and the silent void above. The Iron Spear Initiative, the final, all in Gambit, had entered its last phase, a massed, multi-vector strike on every detectable beam launcher apparatus in orbit. Status report. Patel intoned, voice low but unwavering. Lieutenant. Commander Aisha Karim tapped a sequence on her wrist console. Orbital rail guns primed. Hypersonic drone wingsuits deployed. Nuclear-tipped kinetic rods. En route. All sectors green, sir. Beyond the reinforced blast doors, the remaining human fleet's sea-borne armadas, subterranean maglev gun rigs, and the last of the orbital platforms stood poised. For the first time in nearly 8 months, humanity's disparate arsenals had synchronized to a single purpose. Patel's jaw tightened. Launch Iron Spear now. A synchronized chorus of commands rippled through secure channels. Below, in hidden silos carved into the Himalayas, 300 hypersonic drones roared from their tubes. Simultaneously, autonomous railgun satellites targeted coordinates above the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Arctic, and Southern Oceans. And in the skies just below geostationary orbit, Nuclear-armed rods, each the size of a city bus, plummeted like falling stars. The silent detonation 17. Minutes later, at 11:11 UTC, the final rods reached their orbital targets. Sensors recorded the near-simultaneous detonation of 154 megatons total yield. For a fleeting heartbeat, space itself trembled. Monitors across every command post registered a surge in gamma flux and an expanding shockwave, a rippling distortion. In the void, ground-based telescopes caught a glimmering bloom of energy, distant and beautiful like a cosmic flower. Humanity had unleashed its most terrible weapon. Then, nothing. No cascading debris field. No crippled fleet of alien craft. No trembling mass of rock. The screens simply returned to their steady state of cobalt pulse tracking, untouched and unimpressed. A hush fell over every control center. In Delhi, Commander Patel's clenched fists opened slowly. Status? He rasped. Lieutenant Commander Karim's voice shook. All warheads unaccounted for. No collateral debris. No change in beam intensity. It's as if they evaporated. Patel closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them with renewed steel. Then we escalate. 3. Echoes of sacrifice at the ruined launch complex in Kazakhstan. Colonel Amina Al-Faris surveyed the aftermath of the last surface-to-orbit missile salvo. Blasted hangars lay in crooked ruin. Scorched craters marred the steppe. Her unit, once proud guardians of Earth's edge, had suffered 98% casualties in the opening salvo alone. Amina traced the names etched on the memorial. Tablet erected amid the rubble. Soldiers from every nation, every background, united by one purpose. She clenched her fist, recalling her fallen squad. Rashid, whose laughter once echoed through barracks. Elena, whose steady hand guided the launch systems. And Feng, whose final message, for Earth, always, had cut through static. She knelt by the tablet. You all gave everything, she whispered. We'll make it count. Drawing on the last of her credits, she sent a simple signal to Delhi. Forge the weapon. Release Protocol Omega. 4. Protocol Omega back in. Geneva's subterranean bunker, President Lena Morozov received Colonel Al-Faris's message. Around her, the Council's scientists and generals held their breath. Dr. Emil Park stood beside a crudely assembled emitter array, the fruit of his months of salvage and innovation. The feedback loop prototype comprised repurposed fusion, cores, fractal Natasha lenses, and the crystallized beam residue he'd harvested in New Shanghai. Late-night calculations had sketched a terrifying possibility. Rather than striking outward, Protocol Omega might invert the beam's quantum coherence, turning the terraforming pulse back upon its source. Morozov turned to Park. Are you certain? Park's eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but bright with conviction. The math holds. We can't obliterate them, but we can overwrite the coherence patterns. If we succeed, the beam network will collapse from the inside. Silence. Then General Salinas stepped forward. By my count, no downside. We're dead. If we lose, let's win, Morozov exhaled. Commence Omega. Alarms blared as power diverted from life support to the emitter. Across the globe, stations remotely keyed and activated identical arrays. In the Siberian permafrost, on the deck of the J.'s Akusa, beneath the ice of Antarctica, and on the hardened platforms of the Andes, each flickered to life, resonating in UNISONV, a shattering of silence for 30 seconds. Nothing visible happened. Then, the cobalt pulses altered, first flickering, then pulsing in counterface, like a heartbeat out of sync. Monitors registered spikes of quantum interference, followed by a cascade of cascading collapses. The beams lost coherence, their lattice of entangled particles unraveling in the Arctic sky. The north lights danced anew, hues shifting from emerald to violet. For the first time since November, Earth's atmosphere rang with the whisper of triumph. Commander Patel, stationed in Delhi, watched the tactical display as beam signatures faded. "They're ending," he breathed. "The pulses are dissipating." On every command deck, tears were shed, hands clenched, and cheers erupted as humanity realized it had turned the tide. President Morozov allowed herself a rare smile. "We've done it," she said. "We survived the storm." Vi. Aftermath, but victory bore a bitter taste. The planet's surface was scarred beyond recognition. Fractured crust, new mountain ranges. Raised by force tectonics, seas of crystalline glass. Billions lay dead, and the survivors faced the daunting task of rebuilding a world remade by alien hands docked in New Shanghai salvage camps. Dr. Park stepped outside into the pale dawn. The air tasted of ozone and ash. He inhaled deeply. "We have our world back," he murmured. "Now to save it." Beneath the waves, Admiral Nakamura surfaced in the J-Sakusa, watching the battered Pacific shimmer with cobalt residue. He placed a hand on the viewport. "For those we lost," he said softly, "we will heal this world." And on the plains of Kazakhstan, Colonel Al-Faris stood amid the memorial tablets, her voice rising in a prayer of remembrance. "You showed us how to stand when all seemed lost," she vowed, "and how to strike back with the power of our minds." The last stand had been won, not with the thunder of weapons, but with the spark of human ingenuity. As Earth began its slow recovery, one truth remained. When faced with annihilation, humanity's greatest weapon was its refusal to yield and its boundless capacity to adapt. A sun rose in silent brilliance over a world unrecognizable. What had once been the Great Plains of North America now stretched as shards of cobalt-tinted glass, the crystalline remnants of the terraforming pulses. Wind swept across the jagged horizon, carrying the metallic tang of fused minerals. In the distance, skeletal skyscrapers once Dallas, once Houston jutting shards into the pale sky. Dr. Emil Park stood atop a ridge of broken quartz, the prototype. Feedback emitter waited at his side. Below him, a convoy of salvagers and engineers moved through the ruins, harvesting cobalt glass fragments and erecting makeshift shelters of steel girders and radiation-hardened polymer sheeting. Their task was twofold: to reclaim the irradiated land and to decipher the alien blueprint they had so narrowly unraveled. Park closed his eyes and inhaled the hot, brittle air. He felt the tremors beneath his boots, echoes of newly born fault. Lines yet within those shakes lay promise. Humanity had learned to reshape Earth's crust once. Now they would learn to heal it. 2. The Council of Renewal Deep. Within the reconstructed arches of Geneva's underground complex, President Lena Morozov convened the Council of Renewal. The chamber's walls, once etched with impact zone maps, now displayed interactive soils restoration plans and biosphere reconstruction blueprints. Scientists, engineers, and diplomats gathered around. "We stand at a crossroads," Morozov began, her voice steady despite the wear of the past 2 years. The terraforming pulses were a challenge we barely survived. But our victory over Protocol Omega revealed more than a defensive strategy. It unveiled a language. She gestured to Dr. Park, who stepped forward. Behind him, holopanels flickered through arrays of quantum-entangled particle data. Each beam carried a coherence pattern, Park explained. Not just a weapon, but a transmission, a dynamic lattice of information, geological, biochemical, even cultural data about what the aliens deemed necessary for life. A ripple of astonishment passed through the assembly. Ambassador Jagjit Singh leaned in. "You're saying they broadcast a blueprint for their world, and we commandeered it?" Park nodded, exhaustion etched in his features. "We repurposed their pulses to collapse against their cradle, yes, but the residue of their imprint remains. In it, we find algorithms that show how to restructure terrestrial soils for accelerated regeneration, how to cultivate resilient biosubstrates in hostile climates. Silence fell. Then, slowly, hands rose across the chamber, requests to study the patterns, to adapt them for water purification, for crop synthesis, for rebuilding the ozone layer. Morozov's eyes shone. So our enemy's greatest weapon becomes our greatest gift. Let us use it wisely. 3. Seeds of the New Eden in the coastal greenhouses of old Tokyo Bay. Now a mosaic of salt-barren flats, biologists experimented with a quantum inoculant. Derived from beam residue, Dr. Keiko Tanabe introduced spores of a hyperadaptive algae into nutrient vats infused with crystalline silica from the pulses. Within days, the algae altered its chloroplast structures, thriving in high salinity and filtering heavy metals from the water. On board the JS Akusa, Admiral Ren Nakamura oversaw a fleet of autonomous drones that seeded the blasted oceans with genetically stabilized plankton, another gift decoded from the alien blueprint. Sea temperatures, scorched by the pulses, gradually cooled as microbiomes REBALA and CED dot in the deserts of North Africa. Colonists worked alongside UN engineers to sprinkle pulverized bean glass into parched soils. Within weeks, traces of cyanobacteria took hold, binding sand particles into fertile topsoil. Where dunes once shifted, small oases began to emerge. Colonial monoliths like the Église Militaire Francaise permafrost bunker in Siberia, transformed into research hubs for polar regeneration. Father Anselm Marceau, now scientific liaison as well as spiritual guide, helped direct seismic adaptive planting of boreal saplings whose roots exploited new fault lines to access geothermal moisture. 4. The choir of remembrance. Yet amid the miracles of rebirth, humanity did not forget its cost. Across the globe, memorials rose on fields of fractured glass and sun-scoured steel. Holographic rolls of the departed flickered in town squares, their names spoken aloud in ceremonies that blended prayer, poetry, and logistical briefings on Reconstruction. In Kazakhstan's steppe, Colonel Amina al-Faris stood before the wall of Ekozau, gently humming basalt monuments seeded with beam, crystals that captured ambient radiation and converted it into soft, omnichromatic light. As survivors streamed past, her voice carried across the gathering. They struck first, we struck back, and now we build. For every loss, we plant a seed. For every fallen comrade, we forge a future. Her words punctuated by the wind's low moan across broken miles of glass, remained a vow stitched into humanity's collective soul. V. The Silent Envoys by November 12, 2044, the first anniversary of the Shaft's arrival. Earth's leaders had orchestrated the greatest planetary restoration event in history. From the poles to the equator, teams synchronized the release of quantum-enhanced fluorospores, engineered insect pollinators, and seismic-modulated irrigation pulses. Major Asha Delgado, now head of the United Earth Restoration Corps, stood in the command rotunda of Station Helios's refurbished habitat ring. Through reinforced panes, she watched the shining arcs of drones dispersing regeneration modules over the cobalt-tainted plains. Her voice, once command crisp, now tempered by humility, echoed through the Comare, dispatching the silent envoys. May they carry our promise. We will not repeat the errors of the past. As 1,500 autonomous sails slipped into the atmosphere, each carrying packages of microbial terraforming agents, a tremor ran through the ground teams. In that moment, alien and human design converged, pulse patterns meeting biospheres, creating a new synergy. Vi, beyond the unforgiving silence on a remote plateau, overlooking the shattered remains of Los Angeles, Dr. Park and Lieutenant Yun Zhao unpacked the final module of the Omega Array. It was a compact, Transmitters smaller than a car that could reproduce the aliens' coherence patterns at near infinitesimal power levels. Their hope, not to destroy, but to communicate. Are you ready? Zhao asked, voice taut. Park breathed in, looking across the ruin-laden valley. We're not sure they can hear us, he admitted. But if they can, this will say more than any weapon ever could. He keyed the sequence. A soft, crystalline hum pulsed from the array, weaving data-rich lattice into the sky. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. The violet dawn light refracted through the glass planes, scattering in fractal patterns. Then, nothing. Park stepped back. Perhaps not yet, he murmured. But soon. Behind him, Zhao surveyed the horizon. Whatever happens, we've earned the right to try. Epilogue. The spark that endures. 4 years have passed since Earth's darkest day. Forests reclaim glassed plains. Rivers carve new channels. Through molten rock, cities rise from hardened ruins, powered by solar arrays built atop beam-forged ceramics. Humanity's children born beneath vaults of cobalt sky learn of the fall as mythic lore. The day the stars struck first. And yet, in classrooms from Nairobi to New Santiago, children recite not only tales of destruction, but of the last stand, of Protocol Omega, of the silent envoys. Their textbooks speak not just of war, but of adaptation, cooperation, and hope. Dr. Emil Park, older yet undimmed by time, oversees the first interspecies research station. Earth scientists and marine biologists collaborating to refine the quantum, inoculant for deep-sea ecosystems. Major Delgado's Restoration Corps is now the planetary stewardship agency, guiding every facet of recovery. Admiral Nakamura captains the flagship of Earth's renewed fleet, not of warships, but of exploration vessels bound for the Moon, Mars, and beyond. Above them all, the sky remains tinted with cobalt hues, a reminder that humanity's greatest lessons were written in that unforgiving silence. Yet within that silence lies the spark that endures, the unyielding drive to learn, to build, and to rise anew.